second? How's everyone doing this morning? Good morning.
Good morning.
Is everyone ready to go?
Yes. Rock and roll.
Okay, Julia. Good morning. My name is Josh Lafazan. I have the privilege of serving as Nassau County Legislator representing District 18. I'm joined by Mitch Furman, who's a Vietnam combat veteran, a veteran leader here in the 3rd Congressional District, and somebody who is speaking on behalf of the outrage of local veterans in our community. Every day we host a press conference about George Santos and we say it can't get any worse. He lies about his grandparents being involved in the Holocaust. It can't get any worse. He lies about his mom being in the towers on 9/11. It can't get any worse. He lies about his income. He lies about where he went to school, where he worked. He lies about every item on his resume. And every day we say it can't get any worse. I'm here to say that this is the final straw. George Santos is accused of stealing $3,000 from the charity fundraiser of a service dog who was dying, and that service dog belonged to a United States military veteran. I spoke to that veteran this morning. Rich cannot be here, but he expresses his outrage for what happened. The dog had a tumor and needed money in order to get surgery, and George Santos said he can help raise money. He set up a GoFundMe. They raised $3,000, and George Santos disappeared. That dog ended up dying. And this veteran who already had PTSD from his time in the service is scarred for life. He is permanently scarred from what George Santos did to him. The worst part is that George Santos has no remorse. George Santos denies the allegation, except we have text messages to prove that he set up the fundraiser and he stole the funds. What George Santos has done is unforgivable. So many of George Santos' lies are outrageous. They evoke anger and frustration and loathing. But what George Santos has done to take advantage of a veteran suffering from PTSD who relied on this service dog, stealing the money and eventually this dog dying without treatment, it is the worst thing that George Santos has done, and I think the worst thing that I've seen anyone do in public life or in life in general. He has scarred that veteran for life. What is far scarier is George Santos is now one of 435 people tasked with taking care of our veterans in this country. There are 16.5 million veterans in this country, and our veterans need major help. Our veterans need help with medical care. Too many veterans take their own lives and need help coping with PTSD. We need to do a better job of pipelining veterans back into jobs when they transition to civilian life. And George Santos now has an opportunity as a member of the House of Representatives, not only to vote on Veterans Affairs, but to vote on a declaration of war and sending our men and women overseas in a time of crisis. How are we, as people of good conscience, expecting George Santos to care for our heroes in uniform if he took advantage of one before he entered public life? It is a scary thought that George Santos has the ability to take care of our men and women in uniform who take care of us. Speaker McCarthy, what more do you have to see out of George Santos before you say enough is enough? Speaker McCarthy, I ask you, I plead of you, do you believe that George Santos should be responsible for our heroes in uniform? How much worse does it have to get? And to all Republicans of good conscience, what more do you have to see? When somebody shows you who they are, believe them. George Santos has proven to be a liar and a fraud and a con man. But what he's proven through this action is that he is morally bankrupt as a human being. So we're here, of course, to condemn what George Santos has done. But more importantly, we also want to spotlight that while George Santos took $3,000 from this veteran service dog's charity fundraiser, that dog eventually died. But our veterans need more help. Our veterans need help with service dogs, and those service dogs and those charities need help. And that's why we've launched a charity fundraiser to benefit Paws of War here on Long Island. We started a GoFundMe with the goal of raising $3,000, the exact amount that George Santos stole from the Veterans Fundraiser for his service dog, and we aim to raise $3,000 for Paws of War. We spoke to Paws of War yesterday. They are excited to be the beneficiary of this charity drive. We set a $3,000 goal. Of course, we want to exceed this goal, so we'll put the link on our Facebook page, and of course, we encourage everyone to share the link. George Santos did something that's unforgivable. The way we can make it right is to help a veteran in need. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mitch Furman, again, who's a Vietnam combat veteran, a leader in the veteran community here in the 3rd District, and is speaking on behalf of veterans locally who are just outraged and speechless at what George Santos has done. And Mitch, I'll let you up.
Thank you. Good morning. 20 veterans a day commit suicide in this country. 20 veterans a day commit suicide in this country. Service dogs are just one way that we can help prevent that from happening. I'm thankful that this particular veteran did not find that the way out, as so many do. I'm grateful that he has a new dog. He mourns that dog. Many people that are pet owners know that animals become part of your family. When they're a service dog, multiply that by 100 times, 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times. It's a life ring when you're drowning in the ocean. What George Santos did here is despicable. What he's done all along seems despicable. I'm not sure what straw will break the camel's back, but I too call for McCarthy to man up, stand up, speak up, and do something to expel George Santos. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. I'll leave it with this. We can argue that George Santos lacks the merits to serve in Congress, and that argument is strong. He lacks the political background. He lacks, quite frankly, human decency. But what he is showing through this action is that he lacks a soul. What type of human being could take advantage of a hero who put their life on the line to serve this country, show no remorse for the consequences of his actions? When serving in Congress, the #1 most important task that you have is to protect the United States and to take care of those brave men and women who put on the uniform and serve this nation, because without them, we have nothing. What George Santos has done is he has scarred somebody for life. He has shown that he not only lacks appreciation for our veterans, but he doesn't even understand how important our veterans are to this country. 16.5 million veterans are outraged by the actions of George Santos. And if George won't step aside and resign, then Speaker McCarthy, what more do you have to see in order to expel George Santos? With that, I'll take any questions.
Josh, can you comment on how Santos was recently secured seats on 2 congressional committees?
Sure. So he secured seats on the Small Business Committee and on the Science and Technology Committee. On the small business aspect, the only business George Santos has run turned out to be a fraud. Right? The DeVolder organization that he ran did not disclose who their clients were. He was involved in an alleged Ponzi scheme, and it turns out, according to Newsday, he inflated his job at Linkbridge. So first and foremost, what business does George Santos have serving on the Small Business Committee, trying to root out fraud from the PPP program when he's a fraud himself? What's far more concerning is he's been appointed to the Science and Technology Committee that they deal with, quite frankly, state secrets involving NASA and space. George Santos is undeserving of knowing those secrets, but I also think that he's a national security risk, given many of the allegations, and I don't think he should be given the security clearance that committee requires. So for Speaker McCarthy to put him on committees, it is so morally bankrupt and spineless of himself and the leadership, and it says more about Kevin McCarthy than it does about George Santos.
What do you make of the breaking news that his mother wasn't even in the United States when 9/11 happened?
Sure. So it's right up there with the most despicable action he's taken. Right, 9/11 was one of, if not the most tragic days in this country. What he did through that lie is he went to manipulate the emotions of so many Long Islanders who had loved ones pass or who had friends that were in the towers. He showed that he'll do anything to get elected, but like what we're doing here today, manipulating the emotions of people who passed away and manipulating that raw emotion to get elected. I don't think George Santos has a soul. I don't.
I have a question for Mitch. You brought up a good point just about how, this is just a service dog right now, but he's going to be in Congress making some major decisions potentially about veterans. And I'm just wondering what's your reaction, because maybe you don't have a service dog, but maybe something could impact you. How does that make you feel to know that he is gonna have a hand in that possibly?
Terrible. Absolutely terrible. As a veteran, I'm concerned about all those veterans' issues that I'm involved in constantly. As a citizen of Nassau County, I'm concerned that the county is not gonna get business done because people have said, I'm not gonna answer his call. So if he's ineffective, and in my view unfit, then why does he remain there?
And I'll just add to Mitch's point, veterans in Nassau County need major help. We know we need help with veterans in Nassau County being pipelined into jobs. We know we need help expanding services from the Northport VA, so veterans in Nassau don't have to travel for services. We know that veterans in Nassau County are homeless and need shelter. We know that veterans in Nassau County need help coping with PTSD. George Santos is a pariah in Congress. The only accepting members of Congress are the far right of the fringe and the extreme. And so how is George Santos supposed to get money for veteran health care in Nassau County? How is George Santos supposed to get federal funding to help modernize our VFWs and our American Legions, which are crumbling? How is George Santos going to be able to deliver funding for veteran employment here in Nassau County? George Santos is a little too busy keeping himself out of jail. And we need a member of Congress who's not so worried about that. Any other questions?
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.